our Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. From this side.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Carolyn. It's great to be here this morning in this hotel, which I think I gave planning permission. In fact, I know I gave planning permission for the construction of this hotel. I'm honoured to be here with you all at the CBI because I know what you've all achieved in business, and I know how difficult it is. Because when I first left university, my ambition was to be a manufacturer, an industrialist, an exporter, and I saw what I thought was a market opportunity in kitchen tiles, beautiful handmade kitchen tiles with designs in bas relief of fruit, of the kind you see behind sinks or stoves, I think called splashback kitchen tiles. And together with a couple of friends, we found a place to make them, and we got some lovely designs of cherries and bananas and things in bas relief, and we even found a special government advisor who is apparently an expert in helping you set up tile-making businesses. And we gave him as much money as we could find, and he wrote some splendid advice, basically informing us that the venture was doomed. And we never really recovered our morale. I went on to do other things. But I'm lost in admiration as a result of that experience for all those who have made a fantastic success of their businesses and their industries. And business today, industry today, is doing extraordinary things in this country, dominating 21st century sectors from batteries to bioscience, with record investments, record exports, tea to India. You know the story: tea to India, cake to France, TV aerials to Korea, boomerangs to Australia. We export music around the world. Jason Donovan, they told me, we export the music of Jason Donovan to North Korea. And under this government, we have, of course, an economy that has grown for the last 9 years, is 20% bigger than it was in 2010. Last week, it was announced that the rate of unemployment has fallen to the lowest level since 1974. And yet, there is something very frustrating about this recitation of triumphs, because it is only half the story of an economy that is still not achieving what it could. Like a Formula One supercar, super green supercar, of a kind in which this country, of course, excels, that is only firing on half its cylinders, with so much more natural energy waiting to be unleashed. And the country is being held back, let's be clear, by politics and by a parliament that for the last 3.5 years has simply failed to discharge its basic promise, made umpteen times, to honour the mandate of the people and deliver Brexit. And that is why we must have this election now. I don't want an election in December under normal circumstances. Nobody does. But we have no choice. We must get Brexit done. We have to clear this parliamentary blockage in this dino rod election, because we are, first of all, we're Democrats. There are millions of people who want to get Brexit done because they voted leave and they believe that the EU has evolved very substantially away from what people voted for in 1975. And then there are also huge numbers of people who may have voted Remain, and I include distinguished luminaries of the CBI amongst them, but who just want to respect the result of the referendum. And after 3.5 years, they think, we think, I think, it's time for the paralysis to end. And we have to get Brexit done because it's the best thing for our national mood and the best thing to take our country forward. And by the way, it's the best thing for the economy, because the worst thing now is the continuing economic uncertainty. People waiting to take on new staff or invest in property or just to invest in this country. The UK attracts phenomenal inward investment, 92 billion last year, more than any other country in Europe. But there's now a pent-up tidal wave of investment that could come to this country from people who see all our natural advantages. Great time zone, fantastic skills, the right language, greatest universities on earth. And I know you'll have to forgive me for making political points in this speech. I wouldn't intrude being quite so political in the sanctity of a CBI speech, but this is an election campaign, ladies and gentlemen, so I've got to make no bones about it. One of the advantages of voting Conservative in this election is that we can and will get it done, and get it done in a matter of weeks. We have a deal that is ready to go. Just add hot water, stir in pot. It's there. The skeptics said that it couldn't be done, and they were wrong. They said we'd never get a great new deal of the kind that we have got. This deal allows us to maximise all the opportunities of Brexit, from free ports to free trade deals, from cutting VAT on tampons to banning the cruel export of live animals. We can do exactly what we promised, take back control of our money, our borders and our laws, and we can take back control of our immigration system and decide democratically who gets here in the interests of the UK economy and of every sector of UK industry and manufacturing. And of course, what this deal does is it gives, which is I think what everybody wanted in particular, certainly what I was trying to achieve, is it gives business complete stability and certainty about the arrangements that we have with our friends and partners in the EU as we make the transition in January, as we come out in January. And as I say, the best thing of all is it is done. It's the Blue Peter deal. Here's one I made earlier. And by the way, it has the support, just in case you're interested about the political backing for this deal. It has the support, the explicit support, of every one of the 635 Conservative candidates at this election. Every one. And I hope the implications of that are clear to you for what I hope will happen in Parliament in just a few weeks. So all we need is 9 more seats, and we can deliver Brexit in January. If we get a working majority, we can get Parliament working for you, and we can then unleash the potential of the whole country and get on with our one nation Conservative agenda. And before I get on to that, I don't want to cast unnecessary aspersions on your next guest, but there is only one, forgive me, this is an election campaign. There is only one alternative to that one nation Conservative government that gets Brexit done, and that is a Corbyn-Sturgeon coalition. And what would Mr. Corbyn do if the Corbyn-Sturgeon coalition were actually to form a government? The only hard fact that has swum like flotsam from the Bermuda Triangle of Labour's Brexit policy is that they want more delay. More delay, turning 2020 into a year of 2 referendums. One on Scotland, which Nicola Sturgeon has repeatedly confirmed is the price that she will exact for her support. We don't know, by the way, what Jeremy Corbyn's position is on a referendum on the union with Scotland. Does he want to protect that union, or would he join Nicola Sturgeon in trying to break up the most successful political partnership of the last 300 years? I don't know. Who knows? Perhaps you could ask him. As for his position, Andrew Marr didn't have much luck. As for his position on the EU, it is positively mind-boggling. He wants to negotiate a new deal, at least spend another 3 months, another 3-month extension negotiating a new deal, and then he wants to spend a further 6 months asking the public to vote on his new deal in yet another toxic and divisive referendum campaign. And we don't even know what his own position will be. Will he actually campaign against his own deal? Will he try, in the final reel, to destroy his own contraption, like Alec Guinness blowing up the bridge he's built in Bridge on the River Kwai? Or will he urge his Labour colleagues to vote against his incomprehensible text, like the dying Virgil urging his friends to burn the Aeneid? Okay, slightly literary allusion there. But you know what I'm driving at. It's a mystery. Is he for leave? Is he for remain? Nobody knows. And one thing is clear. The Sturgeon-Corbyn alliance would consign this country to months, if not years, of dither, delay, discord, and division. And with every month of pointless delay insisted on by Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party, it's costing our country an extra £1 billion for nothing. We need to get Brexit done. We need to get Brexit done to end the uncertainty so that we, One Nation Conservatives, can get on with our programme of uniting and levelling up the country across the whole UK. Because if the potential of our country is enormous, then so is the injustice. Because there are some regions of our country that are now 50% less productive than London. I was proud to be mayor of this city for 8 years. It's the most productive region in the whole of Europe by some measurements. There are some parts of the country where people's lives are a decade shorter than elsewhere, where educational outcomes are vastly different. Now imagine if we could change that. Imagine if every child in this country had the same start, had the same encouragement at the beginning of their lives. Think of all the untapped talent in our country. I absolutely passionately believe that around this amazing country, talent, genius, flair are evenly distributed, but opportunity is unevenly distributed. And the answers to that problem, that fundamental injustice, are within our grasp. And our ambition is to unlock the whole of the nation's potential through three things: better infrastructure, better education, and technology. Not just to close the opportunity gap between rich and poor, but also between the regions of the country. And by analogy, you may remember what happened in London over the 8 years in which we were running it. We invested massively in transport infrastructure. There was a fantastic London Challenge education programme. Regions of the city, areas of the city that had been left behind, were able to participate in the growth and prosperity of the whole city. And you saw a contraction in the gap between rich and poor, you saw an increase in life expectancy in the poorest groups, and you saw a huge increase in their incomes as they were able to use mass transit to get to the opportunity areas. That's what we did in London, and that is what we want to do, loosely speaking, throughout the country. We think we can close both those gaps at once, not by decapitating the tall poppies, but by spreading equality of opportunity, giving everybody the same freedoms. And the first and most important is everybody should be able to walk the streets free from the fear of crime. And we need to stop our kids from being sucked into the county lines drugs gangs. We need safer streets. We need proper punishments for serious offences. And that means a government that not only funds the police, as we are, but also backs the police. And that's why we're not just investing in 20,000 more police officers, but backing them up with proper powers to do stop and search and tougher sentences for serious sexual and violent crimes. And what's the best way to stop our young people from being caught up in crime? It's to give, as I say, to give every child in this country the confidence that comes from an excellent education. So we're boosting per pupil funding so that each pupil gets a minimum of £4,000 in primary and £5,000 in secondary. We're putting huge amounts into special educational needs, £2 billion more into refurbishing, rebuilding our further education colleges, investing in skills for our country. Because it's not just universities, fantastic that they are, we must build the skills of our young people. And as we do that, we must also ensure, as I say, that they are able to exploit the opportunities that are being created. Literally, to find the work that this country produces conveniently and affordably. That is the secret. And that means superb transport communications. And that's why this government is embarking on an infrastructure revolution, because Now is the time to make those investments with interest rates at a historic low, not borrowing for day-to-day spending, but obviously looking at what we can do to fund long-term investments. And I think you would agree that that is the right way for our economy. And yes, of course, that means supporting some really fantastic major projects. Crossrail, I was proud to help deliver when I was mayor, the tube upgrades, many other projects, but we now want to go on, as you know, with Northern Powerhouse Rail, the West Midlands metro system, and many other things. Big ticket items we will do. But it also means investing in the simple improvements that I think so many people and businesses have been craving in transportation, modernizing roads and junctions that have become bottlenecks and sources of massive local frustration and economic inefficiency, putting in better bus services, which can make all the difference to towns and villages and rural communities, better cycleways across the whole country. I'm looking for answering nods here. I love cycleways. They're particularly successful in London, despite what the taxi drivers will tell you. They're wonderful things. We need better cycleways. And there's somebody nodding. And we also want every home, every business in the country to have the confidence and convenience that comes with gigabit broadband, 5G, 6G, mobile telephony. Now, you do all those things, and what you achieve is, as I say, uniting the country, raising productivity, education, infrastructure, technology, and you create the platform for growth. And if you create the platform for growth as government, as a one-nation conservative government, the market responds in two vital ways. If you have good transport and safe environment and good schools, then suddenly, as we found in London, here in Greenwich and elsewhere, the market will find that it can build thousands more homes on brownfield sites, superb, affordable homes, giving young people the chance to have the keys to their own property, which every survey continues to show is one of our most fundamental human instincts, and we will help with the expansion of part-by-part rent schemes to get people onto the housing ladder. Second, if you have safe neighborhoods and decent housing and a skilled workforce, good, reliable transport links, what else happens in the area concerned? You get business investment. You get confidence coming back into the areas that have felt left behind and who spoke, by the way, in that 2016 vote to leave the EU. You get jobs, and that is why you get regeneration. And that is why I think this country needs a government that believes in business and understands the vital importance of wealth creation, the need to support business large and small, family business, cutting business rates. There have been 1.3 million businesses created since 2010 in this country. And Napoleon said we were a nation of shopkeepers. He was right. There have been more businesses created in this country than in France and Germany combined, and since 2010. And that is the balance and the symmetry of what I am proposing and what we are proposing with One Nation conservatism. That's what we want to do. It's a balance between fantastic public services and a strong, dynamic market economy. And I say, when people get up at the crack of dawn to get their business ready, when people take out a mortgage for a new venture, when people have the guts to put a new product on the market, we don't sneer at them, we cheer for them. And to make sure that the businesses of this country can continue to flourish. I'm today announcing a package of measures you may have seen, cutting business rates further. We'll have a big review of business rates, cutting business rates further, particularly for SMEs, to help, above all, to stimulate the high street. We'll cut national insurance contributions to make it easier to hire and to put more cash into the pockets of the low paid. We will increase the reliefs for new buildings that businesses need, and this government will double, in order to help businesses innovate, this government will double funding for research and development to £18 billion in the next Parliament, the biggest ever increase in support for R&D. And we proudly back business across this country because we understand that it is they, you, who are creating the wealth that actually pays for the NHS. And by the way, because the NHS is the nation's priority and our priority, and because we believe emphatically in fiscal prudence, I hope you won't mind if I also announce today that we are postponing further cuts in corporation tax. And before you storm the stage and protest, before you storm the stage, let me remind you, Alan, this saves £6 billion that we can put into the priorities of the British people, including the NHS. We've already cut it from 28 to 19%, the lowest of any major economy, and that the alternative is Jeremy Corbyn, who would whack it straight back up to the highest levels in Europe. And that is the key difference between this government and the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn. It is not just that Labour would be an economic disaster for this country because they would delay Brexit yet again. They would simultaneously wreck this economy with a £1.2 trillion spending splurge that would be instantly rejected by the markets, that would massively increase not just this country's debt, but the cost of our debt, jeopardising the government's balance sheet and ability to make future investments. And to pay for it, they would put up taxes on every household in the... Have a seat for a second. I'll be right with you. I'll be right with you. How long do you want me to go? Do you want me to stop now?
As soon as you can, Prime Minister.
I'll be right with you. I'll be right with you. I'll be right with you. And to pay for it, I feel obliged to make these important points, because to pay for it all, they would put up taxes to the tune of £2,400 a year. In fact, they are themselves so worried about a run on the pound that John McDonnell is actually going to impose exchange controls. And I invite you to imagine the only countries that have exchange controls these days are places like Angola, Zimbabwe, or, you guessed it, Venezuela. We cannot let it happen. That is true. We cannot let it happen, but that is the choice at this election. You can come with us and have a government that backs our armed forces as a power for good around the world. You can have Jeremy Corbyn, who has said he wants to scrap them. You can come with us and support police in their fight against crime, particularly against knife crime, or go with Corbyn and the Labour Party, who say that stop and search is inappropriate and oppressive. We want higher wages and higher skills. Corbynomics means higher taxes for everyone. And as I say, we know that the only way that we can have the investments that we need in our NHS and in fantastic public services is to have a strong and dynamic market economy. And the policy of John McDonnell is literally, as he says, to foment the overthrow of capitalism. Above all, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm going to wind up now. Above all, the choice is very simple. It is that we can go with a government and a one-nation Conservative Party that wants to unleash the talents and the potential of this whole country and get Brexit done, get on with our plans for investment in, as I say, 40 new hospitals that are being green-lighted as a result of the decisions taken by this government, 20 hospital upgrades, 20,000 more police, levelling up funding of education. Get on with that fantastic one-nation Conservative programme, because we're able to get Brexit done, the biggest increase in the living wage in memory, because we're able to get Brexit done, or we can consign this country to another year of dither and drift and a year of 2 referendums in 2020. Well, I think we should give that madness a miss, John. And I want next year to be a year of productivity and growth, not a year of 2 referendums. And I don't want us all to wake up on Friday the 13th of December with a nightmare on Downing Street in the form of Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party. What I want is to take this country forward with a sensible, moderate, dynamic, one nation but tax-cutting conservative policies. That's what I'm advocating at this election, uniting and levelling up across the entire country. I believe it's good for business, it's good for our country, and I hope you'll support it. Thank you all very much.
Now, we've got a few minutes for questions. First of all, we're going to take some media questions, which the Prime Minister will manage, and then we'll take some questions from the hall. But we've only got about 15 minutes in total, so please keep the questions brief. Prime Minister.
Well, thank you very much, John. And forgive me, by the way, I thought I had a while to go, but it was obviously the bit where I came to the thing about postponing the cut on corporation tax that caused you to. I hope you will understand it is the sensible, it is the fiscally responsible thing to do at the present time. It doesn't mean that we are in any way averse to reducing taxes on businesses, as I'm sure you understand. I'm going to go to Simon Jack of the BBC, then Sam Coates of Sky, and John Stevens of the Daily Mail.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Getting Brexit done, as you've promised, includes concluding a deal, a trade deal with the EU by next December, unless you choose to ask for more time by the end of June. Will you do that if necessary? Can you guarantee to this audience that the UK will never leave the EU without a deal?
Well, yes.
Just one, if I could also just add one to Rolly's question.
Yes.
Would you encourage His Royal Highness the Duke of York to cooperate with US authorities about his knowledge of the activities of the late?
Okay, well, yeah, good, nice try there, Simon. On the substantive question about the deal. Look, folks, be in no doubt that people said that we couldn't get a deal first time round. We've got a great deal. It's a deal that allows us to come out of the EU as one UK to do all the things that we wanted to do. If you remember, they said that we couldn't change a jot or tittle of the text on the backstop. They said we wouldn't be able to change a word of the withdrawal agreement actually in the time available, which was 3 months, and we did. And we got a fantastic new deal. We're able to get it through in just a few weeks. And if you look, Simon, at the detail of the forthcoming talks, you know, the UK and the EU, as everybody knows fine well, are already in a state of grace as far as our tariffs and our quotas are concerned. We are in a state of perfect alignment and harmony. There is no other trade negotiation the EU has ever embarked upon with a third country where that has been the case. So I think we're off to a flying start. I see absolutely no reason why we should not get it done in the time available. And Sam Coates of Sky.
Prime Minister, Sam Coates, Sky News. CBI leaders disagree with you on your approach and your goals of Brexit and on your plan for immigration. If they, the CBI, worry that you're wrong on the biggest questions about our economy, how can you put to bed lingering suspicions that you just think you can F Brexit, F business? Or do you think that the CBI doesn't represent the true voice of business? And one more thing, did you share the nation's incredulity about Prince Andrew's account of his own behaviour? And as principal advisor to the Queen, what would you recommend she does about Prince Andrew?
Can I say, I don't think we are at difference on immigration, because I think your plan can be made to work.
Fantastic. Well, Sam, I've just got red-hot news from John, which is that he doesn't think that we are at variance on our plan for immigration. And by the way, I think that, look, I have the highest regard for the CBI and have spoken at many CBI conferences over many, many years, and I think you do a fantastic job. All I can say is that we will make sure that we already have a deal that I think protects the needs of British business and industry. And on immigration, remember, Sam, the how we used to do it in London. I believe in having a society and a country that is open to talent. I can see the merits of doing that. We all see it in our everyday lives. But you also need democratic control. That's all we're saying. And an Australian-style points-based system would, I think, be of great, great value to this country in alleviating people's sense that their politicians are simply allowing immigration to be uncontrolled. And I do not think that unlimited and uncontrolled immigration is the right way forward for this country. The United States of America, for instance, has absolutely a country of immigration, has very, very strict controls on who gets in. Many, many other countries around the world have very, very strict controls, much, much stricter than in this country. We should be democratically accountable for our immigration policies. We should have control, but of course, we should ensure that sectors across the economy are able to continue to attract talent, and that is what we're going to do. And as for your other question, again, I don't. If you'll forgive me, I won't get dragged into commentary about matters concerning the royal family, if that's all right. John Stevens of the Daily Mail.
Prime Minister, if you're re-elected, will you commit to keeping Sajid Javid as your Chancellor?
My dear John Stevens of the Daily Mail, look, I'm going to give you an absolutely categorical assurance that I will keep Sajid Javid as my Chancellor. How about that? And I think he's a great guy, and I think he's doing a fantastic job, and I'm proud to count him as a colleague. I'd be grateful, however, if you know, I don't have it. Can we have not endless questions about the personnel at the top of the Tory party? I don't think I want to answer exhaustively about absolutely everybody.
Right, can we now move on to general questions, please? If you've got a question, raise your hand. You should get a paddle and a microphone, and then please state who you are and who you're representing, and please no questions on the royal family. That gets tedious after a while. Number one over there, I think. Can we have that first question, please, for the Prime Minister?
Hi, I'm Laura McCann, and I'm from Advance, which is the third largest software company here in the UK. Luckily and inspiringly, we actually have 30% of females on our board. However, as Caroline Fairbairn said, that isn't the case for many businesses across the country. And I was just wondering if you have any particular plans that you're going to build into policy to try and rectify that diversity, because as a young person looking ahead at my career, I would like reasons to stay in this country. Yes,
well, thank you very much, and we are doing a huge amount to break the glass ceiling where we can in boardrooms where there's I think companies now have to look at their payrolls and audit the pay that they give their employees, and actually, as a result, we've seen, I don't know whether it's as a result, but it's certainly helping. We're seeing a reduction in the gender pay gap, and there are more women now in the workforce than ever, and that's a great thing. And I think it boosts the productivity of the UK. If I may say so, we need to do more in one particular area, and that is childcare. And I think, and we will be bringing forward some stuff. I don't want to anticipate the manifesto. We will be doing more on childcare. Childcare, if you can get childcare right, you can do a huge amount of good, not just for families, but also for the productivity of our companies.
Okay, number 5 paddle, please.
Thank you. Prime Minister, John Laramie from Exeter College. Thank you for the work you've already done to lift up the funding for FE colleges. Will you commit over this Parliament to levelling up the funding to £5,000 for the 16 to 19-year-olds in colleges, as well as those younger people in schools? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Sorry.
Please.
Go on. John, I will take that away. I'm not certain that we're not already doing that, but I will come back to you.
The motto, one country, two systems, is one complete concept. One country is the precondition and the basis of two...
Chairman of the CBI's SME Council. Prime Minister, will you...
will no longer exist. violent offences that undermine one country, two systems will never be tolerated. Second,
commitments at this stage, if that's all right. We've got lots of tax cuts and lots of ways we want to support entrepreneurs, but I'll certainly register your interest, your point with the Chancellor.
Okay, I think we've got time, because people have been agreeably brief, for a couple more questions. So can we have the gentleman over here who's had his hand up for quite a long time, Peter?
Thank you, Prime Minister. It's Nick Lakin from Kingfisher. We're in B&Q and Screwfix. I won't ask about business rates, although you did talk a lot about equality of opportunity. And I would say, first of all, it starts with people having a roof over their own heads. And when the average house price is 8 times the average wage, and the number of social houses built in this country was 6,000 last year, and there were 30,000 in 2010, I would question whether the Conservative Party's housing policy is enough about affordable housing for all of our workers. Thank you.
Nick, thank you. Actually, I think of the 220,000 homes we built last year, vastly more were affordable homes than 6,000. When you're talking about social housing, you may be talking specifically about homes for social rent or one particular model of tenure. I'd have to look at the figures that you're quoting. But don't forget that this government, the Conservative government, built more council homes in 1 year than the Labour Party did in 13 years, which is we are the party of building. And look, see monumentum requiris circumspici, as somebody said. Look around Greenwich. Look at what we were able to do by investing in transport infrastructure, by stimulating growth in areas on brownfield sites. We have got huge numbers of homes built, and I'm afraid that since I ceased to be Mayor of London, there has been a marked falling off in construction. But when Sir Edward, and I were here, there was a vast expansion in the number of properties being built, and we will do that, and we are doing that around the country. By the way, 220,000 figure that I quoted is the biggest number of houses homes built in this country for every year in the last 31 years except one. So we're going in the right direction, but we need to do more. And the secret is to tackle some of the obstructions in planning. We do have a problem, I think, with a monopoly by a very small number of, not a monopoly, but an oligopoly by a small number of developers, and we need to encourage more small developers. But we also need to be putting in the transport infrastructure that liberates development on brownfield sites and liberates great new housing developments across the country. And that is what we're going to do. If for instance, if you missed my message or it was interrupted, I didn't get to the crescendo. We want to unite and level up with better infrastructure, better education, and technology. And that is the way to deliver greater housing numbers. We did it in London, and we can do it across the whole country.
Right, we've time for 2 final questions. I think paddle 4 has been there for quite a while, and then finally paddle 5, and then that's it. I know you'd like the Prime Minister to stay all day and answer questions, but I think we have to. We have other political guests to come along and talk to us. So please, number 4.
Hello, Mr. Prime Minister. My name is Rihanna. I'm with the Patchwork Foundation here today. So my question is whether the Conservative Party have any plans to tackle youth disengagement in terms of politics, voting, and so on. What plans do you have towards that, especially amongst ethnic minorities? Another question from the team is whether the Conservatives will launch an independent inquiry into Islamophobia and religious discrimination. Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you, Rihanna. We are indeed doing an independent inquiry into prejudice of all kinds. And on your point about youth disengagement, we are doing a huge amount as a government to encourage participation in politics and to encourage people to get involved. I'm delighted to say that we have, I think, huge numbers of people registering in this election. And that's a great thing. And I believe that young people have every reason to get involved now in their country's, our country's politics, because it is their future that we're talking about. And I'm very proud, by the way, of everything this government is doing to tackle the issues of climate change and the environment that are so important for young people. That's why we have a zero carbon target, a carbon neutral target by 2050. And again, I think our approach is the most effective one, because the way to reduce carbon emissions, the way to improve the environment, which so many young people care about, is not just to adopt a hair shirt policy of attacking business and attacking consumption, though we do consume too much of some things, but also to support dynamic new technologies. And it's the fantastic battery companies in this country, the wind turbine companies in this country, that are instrumental in reducing CO2 emissions, not just of this country, but of the whole world. And to get back to my main point, it's the private sector and it's innovation in the private sector that is helping to drive that change. And we would not be able to tackle climate change if it were not for the engagement of business and the engagement of companies like your own. So that's why we also, it's precisely because we care about the environment that we also want a strong and innovative economy. And that is a point I would also make to young people.
I think we're going to have to finish. I'm sorry to disappoint the person I thought would be the last speaker, but what I would say is, if anybody has questions they'd like to feed into the Prime Minister, feed them into the CBI via our sort of policy desk over there. We'll make sure the Prime Minister gets them in, and I'm sure he'll respond to them. Now, I think many thanks to you for joining us here and sharing your views. This is a really crucial time in our country's history and development, Prime Minister, and I think we should show our appreciation to you for taking the time to come and see us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Students have finally realised that they do have a voice, and you say we're on Facebook, on Snapchat, but we're spreading messages through that.
When I go to uni, we had over half of my cohort drop out, mainly because of mental health conditions, because it was so stressful.
Young people are frustrated and young people are tired of having their friends being stabbed, and I just want decision makers to wake up and just be more solution orientated.
Now you can't just go home and get away from, people at school making comments. That part of your brain that's not doing well wants you to be worse, and the internet feeds that.
Now you can, at the flip of a screen, see what everyone else is doing, and you instantly compare.
I'd love to see a commitment to LGBT inclusive sex and relationship education across all schools. I think we need to be doing it as early as possible as part of a broader kind of, educational tool for all kids, not just LGBT kids.
I reckon I'll be around 40 years old until I have enough money to own my own home.
It's our future, and if any of us choose to have children, we want them to live in a world with clean air.
Some things are actually changing, especially the mindsets of many people, even if that is not enough, and even if it's not fast enough, it's at least something.
Well, hello again. We will very shortly be joined by the Leader of Opposition, who will be joining us for the third time in a row. Jeremy Corbyn will shortly be coming to the stage. I have to say, as I said in my opening remarks, a very unusual time to be in a general election, and very unusual for us to have both our Prime Minister and our Leader of the Opposition on stage, and totally unusual to have them one after the other. So if you will just bear with us for a few moments while we set up the stage. There is one auto cue up there, and I'm sure there will be another one joining it shortly. I was asked to kind of fill in and say a few words. I suppose I could talk to you about my pottery classes and about all the other exciting things there are to do with one's life. But I thought what I would just say is just a few words about how pleased we are to have all three leaders with us today. Jeremy Corbyn, as I said, we've had him with us now for 3 years. We don't always agree on policy, but we have the conversation. And I think that the fact that he is going to be joining us again today and is once again very happy to take questions is an incredibly good thing. I do hope that all of you in the breaks are able to go and see the amazing stands from the companies who are partners here today. I can see the advanced stand over there. There's Hayes out in the hallway, that you're able to go and join us for our special lunches, and that you may be here for breakfast as well, and that you are able to have a most fantastic day. And there is still only one auto cue arm up. So I might have to start singing in a moment, which would not be a very good thing for anybody. So I am looking at the technology down there. And this is where, actually, in the past, we have had questions up. And you've been able to vote on various questions, but it never really quite worked. It was one of those examples where the technology never quite did what we needed. And so I think I will just wait here until we have the Leader of the Opposition in the wings. How are we doing? There are two up now, so I think we must be just about ready. I will be told. And I hope that many of you will stay for the afternoon when we have a leader of the Lib Dems joining us as well. The first time Jo Swinson will have been on a CBI platform. Again, we are delighted to have her. I have to say, I think it's actually a very interesting thing that we have a party who is coming here to say that they are the party of business. Fantastic, as I said, we want all parties to be the party of business, and we very much look forward to hearing their policies. So I'm sure that we must be almost ready. Oh, yes, we are ready. So I'm absolutely delighted, as I say, to be welcoming Jeremy Corbyn, Leader of the Opposition, to our stage. We are delighted to have the chance to hear his plans for our economy, how we as business can work with Labour to build a stronger economy. So can I please welcome Jeremy Corbyn, the Right Honourable Jeremy Corbyn, Leader of the Opposition, to the stage.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to address your conference today. Absolute pleasure to be here. And I thank Carolyn for that introduction. And I have to say how helpful and useful it is to have regular meetings with your officials from the CBI as well as other business organisations, which I certainly learn a great deal from, and I'm most grateful to them for the time they give up. And I also hope you enjoyed the warm-up act that's just left the stage. It's absolutely right that party leaders come and set out our plans to you directly, because this is an election that will shape our country for a generation. I know that's said at almost every election, but this one, I think you will agree, has come under such unusual and special circumstances that it really is something that will set our country's course for a long time to come. But let me just address something right away to you. It is sometimes claimed that I am anti-business. Actually, this is nonsense. It's not anti-business to be against poverty pay. It's not anti-business to say that the largest corporations should pay their taxes just as smaller companies do. And it's not anti-business to want prosperity in every part of our country, not only in the financial centres of the City of London. And I say this to business too. If a Labour government is elected on the 12th of December, you're going to see more investment than you've ever dreamt of. You're going to have the best educated workforce you could ever have hoped for. And you're going to get the world-leading infrastructure, including full fibre broadband you've long demanded year after year at these conferences. You're going to enjoy the fast, reliable transport links you've always wanted. You're going to have the certainty of a customs union and access to the single market, as again, you've advocated at every one of your conferences ever since 2016. You and your business have so much to gain from a Labour government. Small businesses will see late payments tackled, whether those late payers are larger companies or government or local authorities. Business rates reformed because we know the damage they're currently doing to our high streets and our communities. And I think on this, it's important that we understand a high street isn't just a place of doing business. It's actually that sense of being and community that is very important. And I want to see that improved. And that means tackling the issue of business rates, as well as something I feel passionately about, much more support for very small startup businesses where often people tread a lonely path trying to set up a business they've dreamt of. So it is about access to finance improved through a business development agency as part of the new post bank that we'll be setting up. And that is, to me, a very important development of how local communities will develop. And yes, let's be frank, Labour will ask those at the top to pay their fair share in tax. And we will put an end to the tax tricks that allow the wealthiest individuals and the biggest corporations to avoid paying their way. And yes, we will bring some key services into public ownership. And I'm not making any apologies for that. It's not an attack on the fact, it's actually the very opposite. It's the norm in many European countries. It's taking the essential steps to build a genuinely mixed economy for the 21st century. Even the city editor of the Financial Times called the privatization of water an organized rip-off. So I understand your caution about some of our plans, but your businesses, your workers, your consumers have been failed by rip-off energy bills and very poor rail and bus services in many parts of the country. And I think actually many of you will know that, because you know things can't go on as they are. The Labour Party will be launching our manifesto on Thursday. But I see you've beaten us to it. We thought we were going to be the first, but you've got there ahead of us. You've published your own manifesto. And you've set out 3 great challenges for the next government. First, ensuring every young person has the skills they need. Second, reducing the blight of inequality. And third, tackling the climate and environmental emergency. On the importance of all 3 of those, we're in absolute agreement with you. All 3 are central to my party's plans to rebuild and transform this country. And I'm pleased the CBI has made it clear that to meet those challenges, we all need to change. And you've said that the CBI is ready to play its part in this. That's music to my ears, because despite the impression sometimes given in parts of the press, Labour doesn't believe the state can do all that alone. Nor do we think the state can sit back and leave it to the market either. In government, we will set up a sustainable board, Sustainable Investment Board, involving the Chancellor, Business Secretary and Bank of England Governor. And there'll also be seats for businesses and trade unions on that board. A Labour government will work closely with business because it's in our common interest to build the high-skill green economy of the future. There is no time for complacency. As Carolyn Fairbairn has said, We simply cannot afford another wasted year of political paralysis, indecision and distraction while productivity and investment suffer. But I'm afraid that despite what he has said this morning, the Prime Minister's deal won't end the damaging uncertainty, and it won't get Brexit done. It will subject us to years of drawn-out, bogged-down negotiations. 3 years, maybe more, is how long Michel Barnier said a trade deal on the Prime Minister's terms would take. And the toxic deal with President Trump would take even longer. Our plan, on the other hand, will get Brexit sorted quickly and immediately end the uncertainty for business and our communities, because we won't be ripping up our main trading relationship. Because major British industries, like steel, will struggle to survive in a deal with the USA promoted by President Trump. And now we know that the Prime Minister is preparing to sell out our National Health Service to a US trade deal that will drive up the cost of medicines and lead to the runaway privatisation of our National Health Service. 500 million a week of NHS money could be handed to big drugs companies as part of a deal now being plotted in secret. Let me say this: a Labour government will exclude the National Health Service, medicines and public services from any trade deals, and will make that binding in law, because, to be quite clear about it, under us, our National Health Service is not for sale. The Tories' Brexit failure has wasted 3 years. It's 3 years too long. Enough. Labour has a clear plan to get Brexit sorted within 6 months. We will secure a sensible deal, including a customs union, close single market relationship and guarantees of rights, standards and protections, and will assure the future of manufacturing and, crucially, of the Good Friday Agreement that has brought relative peace to Northern Ireland. And then we'll put that deal to a public vote alongside the option of remaining in the EU. Only a Labour government will take this out of the hands of politicians and give it to the British people for the final say. That's not mind-boggling, it's simple and straightforward and will be settled far more quickly than the endless negotiations we face over the Prime Minister's deal. And with Brexit sorted, we will focus on delivering the real change our country needs. Labour will get our economy moving in every town, city and region with a record investment blitz, and will boost the devolved budgets in Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland. We'll upgrade our national infrastructure with $250 billion of investment over 10 years through a green transformation fund. We'll breathe new life into every community with a further $250 billion of capital for businesses and cooperatives, and will urgently upgrade and expand our schools, hospitals, care homes and housing with a 5-year, $150 billion social transformation fund. This is investment on a scale our country has never known, bringing good new jobs and fresh growth to every part of the country. And with a serious economic plan, we can prioritise the kind of growth that we need. Let's be clear about it. We are facing a climate crisis. We can no longer deny it. We can see it all around us. We can see it all around the world. The recent floods in Yorkshire and the East Midlands were a vivid demonstration. This election is the last chance to tackle the climate and environmental emergency. It's also an opportunity to act before it's too late. Our green industrial revolution will be a central motor of our plans to transform our country and our economy, using public investment, create good, clean jobs, and tackle the climate and environmental emergency. And rebuild those towns that have been held back, those cities that have seen too little investment, and those communities that have seen almost nothing for 20 years. This will create huge new opportunities for businesses to expand, as well as for workers to take up new, well-paid, sustainable jobs, especially in renewable energy and green technology. We don't want anyone, anywhere, to feel they're shut out of these new opportunities. That means everyone, young and old, need to have access to education and skills training. And so, we will create a national education service, providing free education as a right to all throughout their lives. And we'll focus as passionately on technical education as on academic education. Let's leave behind the snobbery that has made further education and technical colleges easy targets for cuts. To get workers into these new green jobs, we also need to expand apprenticeships. So today, we're announcing a new climate apprenticeship program, delivering 320,000 apprenticeships in England alone during the first year of a Labour government. These climate apprenticeships will offer training to school leavers and workers looking to change jobs mid-career, creating the engineers, technicians and construction workers we need to transition to a green economy. 2/3 of businesses worry they won't be able to fill skilled posts in the future. Climate apprenticeships will help to address that, funded with money you, as employers, already set aside for the apprenticeship levy, as well as excess dividends in our planned inclusive ownership funds. And we agree with you that the levy needs reform, so we'll give you much more freedom in how to spend your levy funds by letting funds be used for a wider range of training, doubling the amount you can transfer to small businesses in your supply chains, and giving you more time to spend your levy funds. In government, Labour will deliver real change compared to that the Tories have failed to invest in our economy, failed to deliver apprenticeships, and failed to face up to the climate and environmental emergency. This also has to be addressed in our education system, where I still think many of our children in primary schools don't get to learn enough functional skills, and secondary schools don't give enough emphasis on engineering and issues like that in order to develop greater skill levels amongst young people before they even start apprenticeships. And we'll certainly be looking into all of that through the National Education Service. Our green industrial revolution means that tackling the climate crisis and reducing inequality can actually go hand in hand, because the inequality that scars our society is not inevitable, it's not an act of God, it's not a law of physics. It's the result of deliberate policy that has made us one of the most unequal countries in Europe, both between the billionaires at the very top and everybody else, and between different parts of the United Kingdom. This inequality is unsustainable and, I believe, immoral. Ending it requires government action so that investment reaches all and people are supported to unlock their talents. What a Labour government will do is raise the platform on which our whole society stands so that businesses and individuals can build themselves up even higher and reach their dreams. You know, despite people's differences, there are things we can all agree on. None of us wants to live in a society where we have to step over rough sleepers on our way to work. None of us wants to live in a society where food bank collection points are needed in every supermarket. None of us wants to live in a society where one in three of our children are growing up in poverty. I just want to live in a decent society. And I know you do too. It doesn't have to be an either-or choice, because the opportunities created for businesses under a Labour government will be immense. No more good companies going to the wall because of a dearth of investment, an inability to access the funds they desperately need to survive or grow. No more towns and entire regions abandoned because government ministers are only concerned with the financial sector. And no more talented workers feeling they've been thrown on the scrap heap with no opportunity to learn new skills. So, work with us to make that happen. Work with us to change the way the economy works so that it really does work for everyone. And help save our children and grandchildren from climate breakdown. It's serious, it's real, it's happening all over the world. We'll have to play our part all over the world as well. Let's build a country that's prosperous, where business thrives alongside the people and the environment. A country that truly works for the many, not just the few. That's the real change Labour stands for. And I thank you for inviting me here today and sharing my thoughts with you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Corbyn. Mr. Corbyn's now agreed to take some questions, first from our media representatives and then from the general audience. I'd like to take the media questions first, and I think we'll ask all three of the media who have nominated themselves. That's Simon Jack, Libby Wiener, and Sam Coates, if they'd like to table their questions, and then Mr. Corbyn will answer them. So please, Sam, you first.
Thank you very much indeed, John. Mr. Corbyn, you say you need the private sector, but do you accept that when you, out of the blue, add to your list of businesses you want to nationalise with your BT announcement last week, you're actually putting off that investment, and as this Director General of the CBI said, sending a chill through boardrooms?
Okay, and then Sam, I think, next, or Libby, whoever.
Sam Coates, Sky News. Mr. Corbyn, do you think that companies like BP, Rio Tinto and BAE Systems do good for community and society? And if perhaps not, then can you name a FTSE 100 company that's a good role model for behaviour? And are you going to renationalise any part of the bus network?
Okay, and Libby Wiener, where is she?
Here.
Right.
Libby Wiener, ITV News. Mr. Corbyn, you say that your plan will get Brexit sorted quickly, but how will a second referendum after a renegotiation get anything done quickly?
Okay.
Okay, thanks for your questions. On the first one, about bringing part of British Telecom into public ownership, it's BT Open Reach that would be part of the broadband network that we want for the whole country. Listen, every business has been arguing for years that in order to grow, they need good quality broadband in order for their business to operate. In inner city areas, it's sometimes bad, sometimes very good. In some places, it's very good, sometimes it is terrible. In remote or rural areas of the country, broadband hardly exists, so the chance of getting anyone to move a business there or a start-up business simply is impossible. The proposal put forward by the government was for $5 billion into broadband, which would then be rolled out, and that is obviously not enough, and the private sector have actually not shown any great enthusiasm for delivering it all across the country, particularly into remote rural areas. So you've seen the schemes where people are doing fundraising to try and get fibre optic cables into some parts of the country. When South Korea can manage 95% access to high-quality broadband, and we manage less than 10%, then surely is a lesson for us all here. So I think it's absolutely right that we should say it's a fundamental in everyone's lives that they've got access to high-quality broadband, and therefore the proposal that I announced last week at Lancaster University was for a 10-year rollout of broadband to every property across the country, starting with the areas that have the least access at the moment, moving on into the cities and so on, where access generally tends to be better. And I think it seems to me a fair and good proposal. You accept the principle that there should be universal supplies of electricity, universal supplies of water, universal delivery of postal systems. That's a norm for every industrial society. These days, modern communication is actually by computer, by internet. Therefore, broadband is absolutely essential to this. And I've put forward these proposals because I think they're actually sensible, affordable, and doable. And so we would take over BT Openreach as part of the broadband network that we're putting forward. On your points about big business and what they do, and where they have a social good or social not so good in their work, well, yes, most companies do have social impact funds. Most companies do give a great deal of support to community enterprises. My concerns are sometimes about the behavior of very big oil and mineral companies in other countries and the environmental problems that are caused by their activities there. And so I do think there is a question of good governance that has to be applied to them. But I absolutely accept that companies do want to improve the environment where they are, and the workforce of those companies also wants to do the same. So I'm not anti them, I'm just saying that where there are problems of environmental damage or social damage done by multinational companies in other countries as well as here, then they have a social responsibility to behave differently, and I'd be happy to work with them on achieving that. Your question on buses and bus companies is quite simply this. With the deregulation of our transport system in the 1980s, only London retained a regulated bus service. And you can see the results of that in London, in the very high levels of bus ridership compared to the rest of the country, and the very effective bus routes that exist all over London. I know a bit about this because I was a member of the House of Commons committee in the 1980s that dealt with the issues of the abolition of the GLC and the metropolitan counties and the future transport relationship. We managed to win the principle that there should be a fully regulated bus service across London. Sadly, that didn't apply elsewhere. The newly elected mayors, such as Andy Burnham in Manchester and others, are trying to develop a regulated bus service across their region. What we're doing is empowering local authorities to develop bus services where they don't exist. Some are allowed to do that in the Bus Act, some are not. We would extend that to all, but we would also make an absolute requirement of the integration of services between buses and rail services as well. There are about 1.5 billion rail journeys made every year. There's 3 times that number of journeys made on buses, albeit usually much shorter journeys. And so bus access is something that's very, very important to all of your workforce, I'm sure, and of course to communities as a whole. And if we want to develop suburban and rural areas economically, then there has to be a good quality public transport system for them. And I think buses and tram, metro are an essential part of that, and that is very much in our thinking in the centre of our programme. Libby, your last point on Brexit. This has been debated endlessly in Parliament ever since the referendum took place. It's been debated endlessly in all political parties, including mine. Our party represents people who voted Remain or voted Leave in the referendum. Nobody voted to lose their job. Nobody voted for deregulation. They made a decision to vote Leave or Remain in 2016. And there's been a huge demand for a second referendum, and there is many demands in other directions as well about it. What I've developed, and our party's developed, is what I think is a sensible and credible approach to it. That we go back to the EU and say, we will negotiate with you rapidly a credible option of a trade relationship and a dynamic relationship on rights with the EU, and that will also, of course, protect the Good Friday Agreement, and legislate for a referendum to take place within 6 months with very strict spending limits on how the referendum campaigns will be conducted, and also, I think, an independent audit of the claims made by both sides in those referenda, which is, I think, equally important, and put that to a vote within 6 months. So we'll either have a guarantee of a trading relationship with Europe, albeit outside membership of the European Union, or full remain within the EU, and then we can play our part in whatever reforms we want to make in the future. We've put this forward as a way of bringing people together and bringing an end to this endless debate. You know, all of you in this room, the uncertainty that's come through Brexit. You know the jobs that have been lost. You know the people that have left this country because of the uncertainty about their family situation and the shortages of nurses and doctors within our National Health Service as a result of it. I want to bring that uncertainty to an end by the policy that we've put forward in this election, which is designed to bring people together in order to go forward and develop our society and our country in the kind of way that I hope I've helped to outline to you in my speech this morning.
Thank you. Now, we'll take some questions from the audience. Again, I suggest we'll take 3 questions, and I think that's all we're going to have time for. So can we have some hands and paddles and so on? Number 1 first, please. Just hold on a second. Number 4, and there's a gentleman with his hand up there who hasn't got a paddle but has got 5 fingers. So let's give him an opportunity as well.
The 5 yellow fingers over there last year.
Right, so let's start with number 1, please.
Hello, Jeremy Corbyn. My name's Olivia Knight, and I am founder of group gift platform Patchwork, and also chair of Sharing Economy UK, which is a trade body that represents UK platform businesses that enable people to trade their space, skills, and their stuff. And my question is...
Train them.
Sorry, so trade.
Trade,
yeah. So my question to you is, what do you see in terms of the value of the sharing economy, particularly as it relates to COP20 this year and our goals to be net zero by 2050? We certainly believe that in order to achieve those goals, we all as a society need to learn to share more and waste less. And I'd like to know what Labour is planning to do to support the sharing economy, which is one of the fastest growing economies in the UK, estimated to be worth 125 billion by 2025. That's by PwC. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that question and the speech that accompanied it. Right, number 4, please.
Hi, my name's Hannah from the Patchwork Foundation. All the speakers today have been talking about the importance of diversity in business and politics, but a recent survey showed that 85% of the British Jews in the UK think that you yourself are personally anti-Semitic. I wanted to ask, what are you going to be doing personally to demonstrate that you care about racism and anti-Semitism in society and show that Labour isn't just for the many but not the Jew?
Okay. And finally...
Thank you. Chris Buxton, the Chief Executive of a trade association in the engineering sector, the British Fluid Power Association. Mr. Corbyn, you talked about a lot of the expenditure and the investment that you're going to put into the economy, and you have explained that you're going to be increasing taxes. So the burden that is going to be placed on industry, the people in this room, is not going to be insignificant. You've made no mention of industrial strategy, and as we all know, if you don't know where you're going, any road will do. So the strategy that was developed a couple of years ago by the current government, are you going to pick up on that? And finally, connected to that, of course, we all know how far behind the rest of the Western world we are in terms of productivity. Could you explain how a 4-day week is going to help that productivity? And if it's investment in innovation, given how poor our adoption of automation technology has been over the past few years, what are you going to do to incentivize people to achieve the efficiencies that would be required to make up for that 20% reduction in working time? Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Corbyn.
Thank you very much for the questions. On the first question from Olivia, thanks for your question. I look forward to the next climate emergency conference being held in Britain next year, and I look forward to taking part in it. I took part in the Paris Climate Change Conference in 2015 to learn and listen to many people there. And quite honestly, we have to address the climate emergency in many ways. One is by our use of energy, the other is by the efficiency of the use of energy, and therefore our green proposals are about retrofitting of homes across the country to make them more energy efficient, and of course the levels of air pollution. But it's also about what we can do on the world stage. The point you're making about the sharing economy is an important one, and so we still waste far too much, we still reuse too little, and we still recycle too little in this country compared to many other countries. And the sort of proposals you're putting forward and working on are actually very, very efficient. We waste more food than any other country in Europe, and we have, as I said, the lowest levels of recycling. These issues can be addressed by properly funding local authorities in order to undertake the strategies that they should, but also encouraging and empowering people to take those decisions locally. And I've attended a lot of green transformation roundtables all over the country over the last few months. And it's fascinating, the wish that's there to live in a more sustainable world and recognize that everyone has a contribution to play in this. I had a long meeting with a group of startup businesses in Stevenage, and one of the questions came was, what was I going to do about importation of palm oil from unsustainable palm plantations around the world, and what we do on a trade policy to make sure we play our part in ensuring the protection of biodiversity around the world. I thought it was an excellent question, albeit I was slightly surprised to hear it in that forum, but I was delighted to hear it in that forum, and that's the kind of forum that I think is so important. So sharing and not wasting is very important, and I'm absolutely on board with that. And as a former councillor, I remember arguing many, many years ago that we should be recycling at a time when we were pumping everything into landfill. Fortunately, we've moved on a bit from that, but we've still got a long way to go. Thank you for the question about diversity and racism within our society. Racism is a scourge and an evil for all of us in our lives. It's an evil within our society, be it anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or any other form of racism. I've spent my life opposing racism in any form, be it done by the far right or by the random attacks on individuals, or against a man that was murdered outside my house because he happened to be a Muslim and there happened to be a racist person driving a vehicle that thought it was okay to drive in a crowd of worshippers. Just as much as those people that attack synagogues, daub fascist graffiti over them, or attack Jewish people in this country, the USA, or anywhere else, have no place whatsoever in a civilized society. We will support and continue to fund the protection of all places of worship, synagogues, mosques, or any other place of worship, and also support education within our schools and look at the effectiveness or ineffectiveness of the PREVENT strategy in stopping young people falling into the hands of far-right extremists. The history of the Jewish people has been one of the most unbelievable and egregious attacks on them in Central Europe throughout the early part of the 20th century, which of course ended with the Holocaust and all the horrors that went with that. That is where racism leads you to if you don't challenge it in the first place. But it's also about ensuring that every young person in our society is guaranteed a place of safety, free from oppression and free from racism in any form. So yes, we will be auditing the way in which people, public sector and private sector, recruit to ensure that everyone has a place and a chance within our society. I was brought up to be anti-racist, and I've lived my whole life and will live the whole of my life as somebody that hates racism in any form whatsoever, because it weakens and demeans all of us. And I'm determined to make sure that is what I carry into government if we're elected into government in the general election on the 12th of December. On your point about the last question about taxation, yes, taxation is going to change under Labour. We've made no secret of that. We've made that very, very clear. That the richest 5%, the top 5%, will pay more, and that over a lifetime of government, we will increase corporation tax to no higher than the 2010 levels. I think our economy needs that, and it is a necessary thing to do. We cannot go on being the economy that invests least and a country that becomes unequal more. We cannot go on being an economy that wastes the skill levels and opportunities of so many young people by inadequate funding of nursery education, primary education, secondary education, or the training, as well as the high cost of universities. And so I want us to rebalance the way that we do things. That doesn't mean massive change for everybody. It does mean some tax rises at the very top, but also, as I pointed out in my speech, it means we have a much better qualified workforce, we have a much better trained workforce in the future, and we have that creative ability of all young people being able to be brought to the fore. Poverty is a terrible waste. A family growing up, 4 or 5 children in a one-bedroom flat, it's quite hard for those children to do their homework, to do any kind of creative activity at all, because they're simply lacking any space. So tackling the housing crisis does unleash the potential of so many young people. You know this from your own workforces, you know this from the young people that you meet. So it does mean redressing the imbalances, but it does mean also we create a more productive society, and our productivity levels are way below those of other countries. And the shorter working week that we aspire to will be funded and paid for through productivity increases, as indeed the effectively shorter working week that has developed over many years will happen as a result of that. But it is surely only right that we as a country look at ourselves, look at the stresses we have, and look at the role that government and the public sector can play in bringing about that more decent, more equal society, and the role that all businesses can play as employers as well as contributors to the local community and local economy. And I look forward to working with all of you in government in order to bring about that fairer, more egalitarian society that I think fundamentally all of us would actually sign up to and agree with. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that's all we've got time for. I think we're very grateful to Jeremy Corbyn in the midst of a really critical election to find the time and come and talk to us. So please show your appreciation again.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you very much.
Productivity, I think, is the single most important priority.